I'm JC from One Shot Adventures, and today I'm going to review the brand new Conan, the Hyborian Age RPG by Monolith Productions. Now, I love Conan. I grew up watching the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, read all of the Robert E. Howard short stories and some of the follow-up novels, and I collected some great issues of the Savage Sword of Conan, the comic books. I love the characters, the savage action, the mishmash of cultural elements, and the cosmic Lovecraftian horror that snuck in sometimes that really made Conan's world of Hyborea seem both mythic and dangerous. And as a gamer, it was Conan himself who led me to other RPGs. You see, in my early days of gaming, I was trying to recreate Conan in Dungeons and Dragons, but that eventually led me to other game systems because I realized very quickly that D&D wasn't really ever going to let me play the kind of character that Conan is. A blend of barbarian, fighter, thief, and leader, whose skill with the sword gave him the edge to brutally overcome his foes. Even though TSR released a few Conan adventures back in the day, I learned that I really needed another game system to portray that kind of character and the savage world that he lived in. Steve Jackson Games' GURPS was the first system that I felt could really nail that savage fantasy genre, and in 1989 it even had an official Conan supplement, along with some really solid solo adventures based on the old short stories. In fact, if you like solo adventures, many of those are still worth picking up today. They're pretty good. And over the years, other games would come out trying to give gamers what they wanted from a Conan RPG. In 2004, there was a D20 Conan RPG released by Mongoose. If you like the D20 system, it was a solid launch. It changed how armor worked, added active defenses, and included lots of maneuvers and abilities for warrior characters. And when that went out of print, it was followed up by Modiphius's Conan, Adventures in an Age Undreamed Of. That's a pretty cool name. Launched in 2017, that game did a fantastic job of giving players a full overview of Hyborea through many supplements. And while its 2D20 system was crunchy, it had several cool mechanical innovations that made the action more cinematic and dramatic, such as players earning momentum and trading it off for heroic acts, and GMs able to generate and throw down some doom to challenge the players and make their lives tougher. Modiphius's license eventually ended. It expired a few years ago, and again the Sword of Conan was picked up, this time by Monolith Productions. Monolith, Modiphius, Mongoose, Crom, that's a lot of M's to remember. Monolith is the maker of the very good and beautiful Conan board game. It's actually one of my favorite fantasy tactics board games, although I'll admit the rules are sometimes not the easiest to grok. But Monolith promised that their Conan, the Hyborian Age RPG, would shed a lot of the complex trappings of the previous RPGs and return to savage simplicity. Their goal was a game that was easy to pick up, fast to play, and simple for GMs to run. This is a very different approach from what GURPS, D20, and the 2D20 systems tried to do with Conan. So does Conan the Hyborian Age achieve all of that? Does this RPG capture the brutality and boldness of Robert E. Howard's Conan? Or are you just better off playing one of those older systems? Well, sharpen your Atlantean sword and hack off your chains, because today I'm going to give you a full review of Conan the Hyborian Age. Like most of my full RPG reviews, I'm going to do this with a series of ups and downs. If I like something, it's going to get an up. If I think it's unworthy of Crom, well, it's going to get a down. Here we go. Conan the Hyborian Age is written by Matthew John, Jason Durall, Richard August, and Chris Shepperson. It comes in a 220-page hardback book that uses a ton of great art from their board game. This is a beautiful book. There are 1 or 2 images with nudity, which is true to the source material, but hey, it's the legendary Brahm doing those paintings. But after the very gorgeous Modiphius RPG, Monolith really needed to make sure that their production values delivered here, and they did. So the aesthetics of this RPG definitely get an up. The book is organized like most RPGs. A little bit of setup on what an RPG is, character creation up front, and explanation of the mechanics, lots of sample foes, and even 3 short adventures. So it's very complete as an RPG. You can run a whole campaign with just this one book, and that also gets an up. But let's jump into character creation and its core mechanics to see how that works. There are 4 attributes in Conan: might, grit, wits, and edge, which sort of combines alertness and dexterity. These are generally what you expect. They range from 1 to 8, which is superhuman. The book doesn't really tell you what a typical attribute range is for humans, but you can sort of deduce from some of the bad guys in the back that 2 is human average in each attribute. Starting characters will be heroic, and they'll likely have some 4s and 5s. Almost all of the roles in this game are based off of these attributes. The game system is a little quirky, so let me explain. Various tasks in the game have a target difficulty, similar to what you'd see in a lot of RPGs like D&D. So doing an easy task might have a difficulty of 6, an average one an 8, and a very hard challenge would be a difficulty of, say, 12. To pull something off, you roll a die, add your attribute stat, and subtract any modifiers the GM gives you. But here's the weirdness. The die that you roll varies. Everyone starts with a D6 in each stat, and when you gain XP, you can level that die up to, say, a D8 or D10. So let me give you an example. Let's say that Bombada here has a might of 5 and wants to break down a heavy door. The GM says that this requires a roll of 8. As a starting character, Bombada is rolling a D6 with his might rolls. So he'll roll a D6 plus 5 for his might to break it down. Wait, might 5, D6 stat die, D10 flex die, difficulty 8. Got it. A roll of 1 is always a failure. But you also roll an additional die, a flex die, every time you roll. I don't love the name of that die, but think of it as sort of a critical hit die. Characters generally start with a D10. If you roll the maximum on this die, you get some kind of special effect, usually an auto success or extra damage or a stamina point. Players can choose, and I'll explain stamina in a second. Like the other die, you can improve your flex die over time. But since you want to roll maximum on that flex die, this die improves downward. So you start with a D10, but D8s and D6s have better odds of rolling a maximum, so eventually as the game progresses, you'll want to upgrade that die downwards. So long story short, for starting characters, you roll a D6, add your attribute value, and try to beat a difficulty number, just checking that flex die to see if you rolled maximum so you could do something cooler. Okay, so I see what the designers are trying to do here, but this system is just a little too convoluted for me. You're rolling a bunch of mismatched dice. You first have to check that flex die, then discard it if it isn't the maximum, which is usual, and then you add that flat score from your character sheet to your other roll, then subtract modifiers. It's a lot that happens on a single roll. It's a visual check, a sheet check, some math, and yeah, sure, you can probably learn it fast. It doesn't take that long for players to sort of pick up on, but it's just clunky compared to a lot of other game systems. In D&D, you just roll D20 and add your mods. In GURPS and Modiphius, which are more complicated systems generally, you're still just rolling dice, like either 3d6 or 2d20, pick your poison, and you try to roll under your skill. So Conan's core rolling system is gonna get a down for me. It's just a little too much. And it bugs me because mathematically it's a little suspect. Upgrading a die from a D6 to a D8 is on average the same as getting a +1 to your stat, like might or wits or whatever. Sure, it's a little swingier, but does that really matter in play? I won't get into the math here, but I just don't think all of this added complexity was really adding anything to the game here. Combat works in the same way. All characters have sort of a defense stat, what you need to roll to hit that character. It's usually based on edge, and you just roll the dice and try to equal or beat that number to smack them. If you do, you roll damage. And damage is based on a weapon type. Bigger weapons do different dice of damage, as well as your might score. So if Bombada here hits a bad guy, he'll do 1d8 damage for his axe, and then add +5 from his might. And again, you roll that flex die there, looking for a critical hit, the maximum roll of that die. Armor in Conan subtracts from damage, and anything that bypasses your armor subtracts from your life points. Combat here is pretty typical stuff, and with normal armor plus your life points that you start with, expect heroes to take about 4 or 5 hits before they hit 0 life points and go down. So what happens when you reach 0 life points in this game? Well, you get one final grit check to see if you survive. If you fail it, you're dead. If you succeed, well, you're still out of the combat, but you'll recover afterwards. I found this to be a pretty easy check to make. It's difficulty 8, which means that most starting characters have roughly a 50% chance of surviving death, but much more as they improve. Resting in this game is straightforward too. Twice per session, characters can recover half their starting wounds plus a bonus stamina point. Dying in rest feels a little generous to me. Yes, it is harsher than, say, D&D 5th edition, but not by much. This isn't a game where your characters are necessarily going to fear being peppered by arrows or walking into an ambush, and I just think the Conan world should be much more dangerous. So the easiness of this system, I'm going to give it a down. But it is straightforward for GMs to modify. For example, make it a difficulty 10 to resist death and you have a grittier game. And that's what I ended up doing when I played this, just to give it a more visceral feel. Characters can also spend stamina points to give a +1 bonus to their rolls or take more move actions. I like that there's this rule that lets you spend your last stamina point for extra massive damage, giving those exhausted characters one last great swing when they most need it. That was pretty cool. I do like that this is one of those RPGs that separates minions from bosses. Tough opponents get life points and armor subtraction like heroes, but minions just get something called a threshold value. You just don't bother with life points and armor. If you beat a minion's threshold, well, he's dead. And if you don't, he's wounded, and the next hit will automatically kill him. I think minion rules in games are pretty convenient, and this gives your barbarians the ability to just cut through hordes, and cutting through hordes in games will always get an up from me.
I love cutting through hordes. Wait a second. It occurred to me that if most enemies have a threshold value of, say, 4 to 6, and characters are rolling a d6 plus 4 or 5 for might, honestly, this game seems pretty easy. Everyone's going to go down in one hit unless they're a boss. Is this game too easy for barbarians?
You know, you're right. Everything in this game is pretty easy to do. The target numbers are generally low. It's easy to kill everything in one shot. Sorry guys, I think Conan there just gave you a down. Now that you know how the game system works, I'll cover character creation. It's fast. Players can create characters in about 10 minutes, and that's an up. Players distribute 16 points among those 4 stats. Then they pick a background, which gives them some bonus life points, a really lightweight special ability, and some unlock the ability to learn magic. There are lots of backgrounds to pick from, typically based on the terrain of the world. The characters all come from somewhere. Someone from the wild gets the ability to spend stamina to heal themselves, while somebody from the north gets bonus damage and the charge skill for free. I haven't played the game enough to say whether these character options are all balanced, but they don't seem to be far off. And there are about 10 choices, including a couple of weird ones, like From the Blood of Jabal Sag, which is a bit like a druid. The simplicity of character creation and the choices here, well, that gets an up. But I do wish it was more tied into the world. Rather than being from the wild, I think it would have been more evocative if it was like from the Baroccan Isles or from the Palace of Shadazar. There are so many wonderful countries and locations in Hyborea. Tying character creation to terrain is sort of an odd choice. So while I gave the system an up, the flavor here is pretty generic and not tied into Hyborea as much as I would have liked. Except for a rare few of those sorceress origins. So just the genericness of this, well, that gets it down. Next, players spend skill points to buy 2 or 3 skills. Skills give you little bonuses and such. For example, Iron Hide increases your life points by 3. Assassin lets you use Edge instead of Might for melee attack bonuses. Hello, D&D Versatile. And Eagle-Eyed increases your range damage by 1. And one of those skills lets you upgrade your flex die, that critical hit die you always roll. That's a fantastic one to get. I encourage you to get that one, though it does cut down your other options because it's more expensive. Almost all of the skills are physical ones. I honestly can't even think of any mental skills. There are also advanced skills in the back of the book, sort of floating off by themselves by the index. Not sure why they're there, separated from everything else. I recognize Monolith was going for simplicity, so I'll let that slide, but it's a little weird that they're off in the back. I want to talk about something at this point. You can see here with 4 attributes, 3 of which are physical, 100% of the skills that are physical. Well, this is a straight up combat game. Any intellectual task is going to be hand-waved with a wits roll. And when I ran a couple of sessions of this game, well, wits was a dump stat because 95% of everything in this game is about fighting. And this frustrates me on a few levels. First, I don't have a problem with some RPGs being all about combat, but the ones that do it best usually have extra options or systems to make combat more tactical and give players choices during the action scenes. Think about Draw Steel with its battlefield control mechanisms, Mithras with its action points and cool combat effects, or heck, even the long-forgotten Riddle of Steel RPG, which made players carefully balance offense and defense and fatigue every single turn. Dungeon Crawl Classics even has a wonderfully simple system for fighters that lets them do amazing creative feats of might during combat with a simple roll along with everything else you're doing. The Conan RPG's combat system just lacks that flair or optional rules that combat-focused games tend to have. There's no called shots, taunting, grappling, mighty deeds, any of that.
What do you mean I can't go for the neck?
And even the advanced fighting styles, which are also shoved in the back of the book by the index, just barely scratch the surface. They just let you trade off one set of bonuses for another. Lack of options in a Conan RPG? Well, that's a big down. In a Conan game, even if you want to keep it all simple, give me options. Otherwise, we're just playing a more advanced version of Hero Quest. And the source material isn't just hacking through opponents. Conan was many things. He was a thief. He was a general who led men on the untamed frontiers of the Pictish wilderness. He was a pirate and an explorer. They even talk about in this book how he was a cartographer. He negotiated with sorcerers and kings. He was a king. But none of that is covered here. GMs are completely on their own if they want to work anything into their campaigns that go in a direction that isn't just hacking apart foes. You're going to get strong heroes or fast heroes in this game, and I just think that's too narrow. So the obsession of physicality at the cost of everything else interesting in this setting, that's going to get another down. All right, let's jump into magic though. Hyborian magic is a tricky thing. Sorcerers in Robert E. Howard's world are playing with fire. Magic in this world is always unpredictable, dangerous, and generally only really controlled by the villains in the setting because it's fundamentally unnatural. Sorcerers are terrifying, and magic often even connects to Lovecraftian things that you don't want to know about. Nobody in this setting should be firing magic missiles willy-nilly in this setting or popping around, teleporting. That just doesn't belong in a Conan RPG. Are you saying that I, Thothamon, Master Sorcerer of Stygia, can't cast a simple magic missile in Hyboria? Watch this. And I have just awoken a Lovecraftian god. Excuse me, need to run. Characters can unlock spell lists based on the background they chose, and they'll end up with a small number of spells. And that's fine. And while I appreciate that the spells you unlock are short, mechanically easy, they're usually a sentence or two or three, think a little bit more than Shadow Dark complexity, I think the magic system misses the mark when it comes to the setting. Magic just shouldn't be programmatic in this world. But here, spellcasters roll to cast a spell, spend some stamina or life points, each spell has a cost, and the effect just goes off. There's nothing about backfires or dark prices to pay. It's all fairly rote. Cast a spell, spend the energy, off the spell goes. And the spells are pretty tame. One spell lets you create a horse. Another increases your touch attacks to close range. Another lets you create a few points of armor. They're all very mechanical. It's an okay magic system for a generic fantasy RPG, but for a Conan RPG, I've got to give the magic system a daggone down. And I do admit that few Conan RPGs have gotten magic right. Letting players use magic and keeping it terrifying and unpredictable and mysterious is really hard. GURPS certainly didn't do it right in their Conan world. Modifius did a little better, tying magic into their Doom system and certain spells having very heavy costs. But this RPG, the new Conan game, it's mechanically sound, but just not enough flavor. Next up is the GM section, which mostly talks about how players advance. This is pretty easy. Characters earn XP, which can be used to buy legendary skills. These are the primary ways you increase your stats or increase your stat die from a D6 to a D8 to eventually a D10. And again, they're generally all combat related abilities you'll gain. The rules are followed up by a Bestiary. It features dozens of different creatures and opponents along with lots of variations of each one. It's pretty complete. It has most of the monsters and foes that GMs would want to use in a Hyborian campaign, from pirates and bandits to man-apes and jungle dragons, and there's variations of all those bad guys, so GMs can easily mix it up from one encounter to the next. The stat blocks for the monsters are simple, easy to understand. Most feature a single special ability the bad guy can use to make your players' lives harder. So the completeness of the Bestiary, the simplicity, the variations, that gets enough. There are about 35 pages in the book about the world of Conan, covering some key NPCs, countries, and locations. I found this whole background section pretty workmanlike. It reads more like a textbook than a toolkit to help GMs create great campaigns, although there are some text boxes scattered around trying to help GMs figure out maybe where to start adventures. So the 30 pages of background information, well, it's fine. But I'm giving it a little bit of leeway here because the Hyborian world is just monstrous, and this RPG only focuses on the Robert E. Howard stories as canon, so making an excellent world building section is probably just out of scope for any RPG that tries to do it all in one book. So lots of background, it's good, but eventually it's going to need more supplements to really fill out the world, much like other RPGs did. And the game includes 3 short adventures, and including adventures makes GM's lives easier, so that immediately gets an instant up from me. The first adventure is really short, easily playable in an hour or two, and it's basically a recreation of that famous scene in Conan the Barbarian where Conan runs from wolves, stumbles into a burial mound, and claims his Atlantean sword, which, by the way, I've actually gotten to hold the real sword. Oh, by Crom, that was so cool. In this retelling of that part of the movie, however, the king under the mound has an army of undead that the players must chop their way through. It's a good tutorial adventure, but if you have experienced gamers, I'd skip it for the second adventure, The Seal of Acheron, which features more plot twists, pretty small ones, but there are plot twists, and some cooler, more creative monsters to fight. The third adventure, which is based on the classic Conan tale, The Frost Giant's Daughter, I found that one to be a bit of a slog, with the PCs just having to survive 3 waves of attacks by increasingly difficult opponents. Felt more like a board game scenario than an RPG scenario to me. But while these adventures are very introductory, I appreciate that they are there. And players who bought the Monolith Conan board game will love that they can instantly use all their maps and miniatures for those adventures, since the adventures are sort of based on the maps that came in that board game. So you can see from my ups and downs at this point, this is a pretty mixed review. Monolith clearly wanted a Conan RPG that stripped away complexity and got players right into the action, but in the process, I think they sanded off too much of what makes Conan compelling in the first place. The core system feels over-engineered for something supposedly designed around speed, with its mismatched dice, extra checks, and dice resolution mechanics. It just never felt particularly elegant at the table. And once you even get past that, the game just feels mechanically thin. Combat is almost the entire focus of the system, yet it lacks many of the tactical options, brutal decision-making, and cinematic flair that other combat RPGs have brought to the table. Meanwhile, the world of Hyperborea feels oddly underutilized in character creation and a magic system that misses the dangerous, corrupting, Lovecraftian tone of Conan's sorcery. That said, the production values here are excellent, the bestiary is strong, and the included adventures make it easy for a GM to jump in immediately. I don't think that this is a bad RPG, but I do think it's a disappointing Conan RPG, especially compared to earlier games that I think just better captured the savagery of the setting and the larger-than-life scope of Robert E. Howard's world. And if you're interested in what my take is of what a Conan adventure should be, check out my website, oneshotadventures.com, where you can download the free adventure Queen of the Red City. In this sandbox adventure, a vile pirate captain vanished on a primordial island, which was said to hold the treasures of an ancient Zemri prince. The PCs rediscover this lost jungle isle where they hope to discover the lost treasure, but of course, they're going to have some problems and danger once they get there. Queen of the Red City is written for multiple game system, and like all of my adventures, it includes pre-generated characters and handouts. Check it out, link in the description below. If you enjoyed this review and want to see more like it, don't forget to like and subscribe. That really does help my channel. Do you have a favorite Conan RPG? Or have you played this one and have your own thoughts? Did I get it wrong? Well, let me know in the comments below. Until next time, I'm JC, and by Crom, have fun gaming.